Live. Welcome to another edition of Office Hours, a weekly live show brought to you by a team at Bunker Lives, a national network of veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs dedicated to growing our ecosystem. I'm your host, the one and only Iron Mike Steadman, usually coming to you from the beautiful city of Newark, New Jersey, but I changed it up today because I'm coming from Harlem. We're joined by my co-host, Amy Morrison, and our special guest today, none other than Stacy Kildal. Good morning, ladies. How are y'all doing?
Living the dream. How about you?
I'm good.
I told Stacy I was excited to see her again because she and I had an opportunity to record an amazing podcast episode together, part of our mini series on small business finance that we recently released. Excited to talk about that, as well as the Intuit Adopt a Small Business program. If you're a small business owner and you're not using Intuit products, you're missing out. They've got some great stuff that we're going to dive into. But before we do that, let me go ahead and pass it over to Amy to share any updates that are taking place in the bunker.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, we got a lot again this week. So first up, we've got Breaking Barriers and Entrepreneurship Workshop Series. Those applications for the 8-week program are open now. So I will drop the link in the chat. That's for Asian, Black, Hispanic, and female entrepreneurs who are basically early stage. And then also we've got on our blog, we're welcoming our newest cohort of veterans and residents, 23B. So you can check out who is in that cohort and maybe connect on LinkedIn or whatever. And then we've also going to talk about, we'll talk about it later, but the Crash Course in Small Business Finance podcast that Mike mentioned, that is up and you can check that out after you listen to this, if you really want to. But I'll drop those links in the chat again, like I said, and then we'll also be promoting that on the web, on the social media. And then another thing we've got going on is how to acquire your first 10 customers. So we put together an ebook of tips and tricks on how to get those first 10 customers and make sure your product market fit's doing its thing. And then finally, the last thing I want to talk about before we get back into the chat is if you want to be a guest on this show, I will post the form in the chat and then you can fill out that form and we will try and get you on the show. And that is all I have.
Appreciate it, Amy. Like she said, we've got some great resources out there. I mean, the newsletter that Bunker Labs sent out last week, I immediately texted the team and said, we're putting out a lot of resources to serve the community. You just got to be willing to take advantage of it. I know a lot of you out there are struggling acquiring those first few customers. Download that guide on your first 10 customers. And we know that finance is a sensitive subject, especially for those of you that are bootstrapping your ventures, got to pay yourself some kind of salary. And we talk about all that in the mini series on small business finance. So got a lot of great resources for you. So without further ado, I get to introduce our guest, none other than Stacy Kildal. Stacy is a QuickBooks ninja, right? Master, like Jedi Master level ninja. She's been running a small business for over almost 2 decades at this point, almost 3 decades.
No, gosh, I'm not that old. It's about 20 years. So I started doing it as a contractor in 2003 and then formed my LLC in 2005. So I've been doing it 20 years.
And you have literally every QuickBooks certification that has come out.
I do. Yeah. Yes. The advanced desktop, which is no longer, they discontinued that QuickBooks Enterprise certification. I actually was the first person certified in QuickBooks Online and actually the first pro advisor to get past the payroll certification as well.
So I want to start by talking about 2 things. First, let's talk about this Intuit Adopt a Small Business program. What is it and why should people think about applying for it?
So I feel like, so I don't work for Intuit. I have my own bookkeeping service like we talked about, but the Adopt a Small Business is really a lovely program where Intuit comes in and they really just try and help these small businesses succeed. I don't know all of the details because I don't work for Intuit. So I know at a very high level. And I do know the team that works with it. I have worked with that directly with that team that's in charge of that program. And they are one of my favorite teams to work with in all of Intuit. Every time I have had the opportunity to, they're the ones who asked me to do this and to do the masterclass that we have that's going on tomorrow. And everything that they do is really out there to help small businesses succeed. Like that is their goal. And it's a really amazing, caring team to work with.
And so my apologies. So the masterclass tomorrow, what's the topic?
So the masterclass, we're going to be talking about budgets. So we're kind of building on the podcast that you and I talked about, and we're going to be talking about just how important it is to create a budget. I'm going to be going through some step-by-step processes on how you can do it. You don't necessarily need accounting software to do it. You can build a budget in just a spreadsheet. I mean, Google Sheets is free. If you have Excel, OpenOffice is free as well. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. I can't wait.
So what is it you think about finance, particularly for small business owners that seem so intimidating?
So I feel like, and I think I might have mentioned this when we were talking about on the podcast, and it is really a little bit overwhelming. I call it the Mount St. Laundry problem, where they see this thing that they have to tackle. I need to get funding for my business. I need to start marketing. Whatever it is that they need the money for, it's overwhelming. And so they just really don't know where to start. And I think it's really important to work with programs like yours, or, there's other, SBDC centers, maybe locally, if they don't have a local Bunker Labs program to work with. I love yours because it's so specific to your audience. So when you're working with that, when you have people and you have programs like that, they can help you pick apart that giant, overwhelming pile of laundry and put it into the smaller piles. You're going to put the colors over here, and maybe you have delicates that don't need to be dried. And that's how you can look at, okay, we need to get funding. What's the first thing that we need to do? We need to have a business plan. And they can help you go through and build that business plan. Once you get the funding, what's the next step? We need to have a budget. How is the money going to be used? How do we allocate all of those funds? And so I think that's really like the biggest obstacle, is just feeling overwhelmed and having too many parts coming at them.
I think another thing is a lot of times it seems like finance is for other people, right? Like people got these elite MBAs, and we think that they know some information that we don't. And so it's like we know it's important, but like where do we go about actually learning it? Like where do we begin?
I think it's really about having kind of a trusted advisor, somebody that you can go to. I don't even have an associate's degree. And I teach a
Right.
lot of people who have MBAs in accounting because I know the software. They may not know the software. So when I'm teaching QuickBooks, I have a different level of knowledge than they do. They may be a tax expert on how to maximize your tax deductions. That's not my jam. So I think it's really important to find organizations like this that can really offer that expertise and that help to get you where you need to go.
I know one of the things that you just mentioned and we talked heavily on the podcast about was you still encourage people to write out a business plan, because this lets them think about, hey, you know, first of all, how are they pricing their products or services? What is
Yep.
the market that they're going after? And then just at a base level, right? What do they plan to pay themselves and their team? And then by having a document like that, then when you do bring on that bookkeeper, you bring on that accountant, right? Now you're starting the process of getting all this stuff out of your head and giving them something to work with to create that initial plan, that initial cash flow statement, and say, hey, these are the things that we need to think about based off of the information that you just shared in your business plan.
Exactly. And the business plan doesn't even have to be like super formal or fancy. For years, I had just a notebook, just a wire notebook, like, college ruled notebook. And I would write, here's my 5-year plan. And then I would break it down into each year that I would do it. And then I would take, okay, so this next year, how am I going to break that down by month or by quarter? And keep in mind that that business plan, and as well as your budgets, those are living documents, and it is okay to pivot. In fact, if you don't, then I feel like you may not get the results that you want. So when you see that maybe this marketing money isn't working the way I want, you need to kind of go back to that plan, whether it's a budget or your business plan or your marketing plan or whatever it is, and say, okay, what were the other options, and let's pivot and make a different, a different choice as to where we put that money and how we use those resources.
I think additionally too, like we come up with these plans, we get started, and we're super scrappy. But now we're in it, and we got to build some systems and process for managing our business, which includes our finances. So that's why we talked about, what does your weekly battle rhythm look like? Kicking off the week with a kickoff call, then maybe at the end of the week you review some stuff, maybe you check your cash flow, and then doing that again every month and every quarter.
Exactly. I think it's really important to do that. And again, getting feedback into one of the things that I've learned from working directly with Intuit for as long as I have is feedback is a gift. And talking to the people, your customers, your clients, the people that you work with, that are working for you, getting that input and on a regular basis so that you can make those decisions, as well as looking at the numbers of what your business is doing. That's really the only way that you're going to be able to succeed.
Something I notice frequently when I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs in the bunker, very few of them are paying themselves. And I wonder if it's a thing of something that they're not factoring in initially when they're designing their products or services, or is this something we just think we put off because we just it's not a thought, right? We think we can build a real business without covering at least our basic expenses for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I don't think that I've ever dug into the mindset of why my clients have taken so long to start paying themselves. I think that I mean, that's a really good one. A really good question as to, why they don't do that. But also you have on the other spectrum of that, you have people who are taking too much of a draw and they're not really leaving too much in there to actually build the business. So it's a delicate balance. And again, like working with the adaptive business program that we mentioned, it's really, from what I know about it, it's 4 or 5 Intuit employees. They virtually adapt a business to really help them kind of get up and running. And I can't recommend adapting or applying for that enough. It's really important. And again, just having a good team around you to just bounce ideas and to get advice about what should I be paying myself, how should I be allocating the funds that I have, what's a industry benchmark. That's a really important thing. I work with a lot of auto shops, and so auto repair shops, and so one thing that a lot of new ones that I have worked with don't even think about is what should the ratio of parts to labor be in terms of revenue. Are my parts half as much as my labor? Then I like to see a 1-to-1 over the last 20 years. It's what I've seen. So when you kind of talk to them, they can kind of shift and pivot. And once they kind of make those realize that, oh, you know what, my parts and my labor are kind of a little bit off, and they have a really good idea of what their fixed costs and what their variable costs are, then they're able to properly pay themselves, put themselves on payroll, or take the draw if they need to.
I remember when I first became an entrepreneur, I didn't realize just how little founders pay themselves, initially. Because the big fear for a lot of us is what? Cash flow, particularly if you're a bootstrap founder, right? You got
Yeah.
to have healthy cash in your business at all times just to cover your basic business expenses. Then you start hiring on team members. And then also you want to maintain some flexibility. And I know for a lot of us after COVID, right, we always need those reserve funds. And so
Yeah.
it can be this hesitancy to be like, hey, I'm not actually going to pay myself that much because it's more important for me to keep the business healthy so that I have a lot more flexibility.
Exactly. Yeah. It's tough. And I mean, you know, one of the things that you can do is figure out what you need to make, like when you're starting, what do you need to get from the business to be able to survive? And then kind of figure out, okay, this is what I need. I need $8,000 a month. I need $3,000 a month, whatever it is that you need at the end of the month to pay all of your bills. And then kind of figure out, you can kind of back your way into what your revenue and what your goals are, because then you can figure out what is it going to cost me to run the business again. And then so at the end of it, this is what my revenue needs to be. And then you can make a plan to make sure that you are getting paid what you need to survive.
One of the things I like about you is that you've been in business since 2005. You've survived a recession, a pandemic, God knows everything else. What have you learned along the way about the importance of staying alive and how to stay alive despite all the different, circumstances that are thrown your way? Because we see a lot of founders, they come out the gate swinging and then they're not around 2, 3 years later. Particularly my cohort of veteran entrepreneurs I came in the ecosystem with. There's only a few of us still hooking and jabbing.
So there's a couple of things that I love this question. There's a couple of things that I have learned. One is that I need to recognize what I'm not good at. Starting my business, really, there was nothing in my life that taught me as quickly as owning a business did what I am good at and what I am not good at. And being able to recognize this is not something I am good at, or this is not something I like to do, was really important, because then you can delegate that and you can communicate that to your clients. One of the things that I'm not good at, returning phone calls. My outgoing voicemail on my business phone says, please do not leave a message. Text or email me. Text the number you called, because I learned I'm horrible at making return phone calls. The second thing I learned is flexibility. You have to really be able to kind of be flexible in the situation. In whether that means, for me, it meant figuring out that I'm going to make it as frictionless as possible for my clients to get me the information that I need to do the work for them. Instead of saying, you have to use Dropbox, you have to use this file sharing, you have to do this, it was easier for me to say, what works best for you? Do you like Dropbox or Google Drive, or do you want to email me? And that made things a lot easier. And then the other thing is that I learned was perspective. I'm a bookkeeper. Nobody's life depends on what I do for a living. And so that's what I try and tell my clients all the time when they kind of get a little bit anxious or a little bit panicked about something that's happening in their books, or, like, oh, this got misposted in QuickBooks, or I really screwed this up. Can you help me fix it, Stacy? I just tell them, you know what? It's okay. It's just software. We can fix it. So I think those are the three biggest things that I've learned over the last, and patience. I've learned to have patience, and actually helping my business actually helped me with my parenting, because I finally learned patience, which is not something that I was born with, I will say.
And what about the clients you've seen, those that have, stayed alive as well?
They're the ones who do all of those things. They are able to they understand their numbers. They are flexible. They understand that, like, people are human, and they have patience with that. And just because this thing is happening right now, it doesn't necessarily reflect on them as a person or their business as a whole. And so I think those are the ones who have withstood the long haul. The majority of my first client, I still have 20 years later. And he's really doing well. And it's because he asks advice. He listens to the advice. He is able to look at his numbers and make decisions off of that. He's hiring. That's a really good thing. People don't understand when they need to hire. They tend to keep bad hires too long. So that's something that took him a little while to figure out. Like, I can't keep this guy here for too long because it's losing me money. So he was able to do that. So just being flexible and realizing and recognizing weaknesses. Those are the biggest things I think that my successful clients are good at.
So before we transition to a book recommendations, if you have a question, go ahead and drop it in the chat. I see a few comments. Michael Persinger, our friend from Canada, says, I still need adult supervision when it comes to the books. A lot of us do, Mike. You're not alone. And then on the comment about paying yourself, Chris Anthony says, I didn't pay myself for the first 12 months. He wants to see if he could make it work.
Wow. That's a long time.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
Well, Stacy, what book rec do you have for our viewers today?
Okay, I just finished reading this book, and it sounds like it's actually really, really boring. But it was really fascinating. It was all about parking and how parking has really kind of dictated how cities are built, how architecture works, and it's called Paved Paradise, How Parking Explains the World. It doesn't have anything to do with business. It's just a really fascinating book. It was really interesting.
That's good. Sometimes we need to change it up. I like fantasy stuff. Just to, because I do read a lot of business books, but it is like to free our brains up because we can only process so much information at a given time. My book recommendation for you all is Passion, Purpose, Profit, Sidestep the Hustle, and Build a Business You Love by Fiona Kildal. Fiona is a business coach based out of Australia, and I actually came across her through a podcast, My Daily Business Coach at the time, and she's recently rebranded it to My Daily Business, but she's fantastic. One of the things that I find myself attracted to more and more these days are values, people's whose values align with yours. One of the things I feel like me and you hit it off on the podcast because we both run small agencies. There's a lot of pressure these days to, grow. But some of us actually enjoy just a small, intimate group of clients that we can build relationships with. Just like you said, you've had a client for, 20 years. And I feel like Fiona comes from that place as well, this place of abundance. And really, the thing about her book, it's the closest thing to having a business coach in a book. She literally goes over core values, helping you think through different lines of revenue, products, and services that you can launch, how to build out your marketing plan, how to nail your why, how to hire team members. It's just a great, great book. And since I started doing coaching myself, both with Iona and my company, Flawless Acceleration, I really look up to her. And so highly encourage you all to check out the book. Like I said, it's Passion, Purpose, Profits, Sidestep the Hustle, and Build a Business You Love.
I'm going to look that up. I'm going to read that.
So before we wrap up here, Stacy, I want to give you the final word. For people that feel overwhelmed, they know they need to prioritize their finances, but they're busy, trying to sell product, they got to make their website, they got to do all this stuff. What words of encouragement do you want to leave them with? And then also, if they want to work with you, how can they reach out and find you?
So the first part of the question, I would say stack rank it, make a list of what you need to do. I'm a big list maker, and put it the priority, and then block out the time to do that stuff on a calendar. Like just block it out and get it done. That I think works for, I used to do a lot of coaching, and that was one of my most successful tips, was just blocking out the time and getting it done. There's not much more for a lot of people that is as satisfying as crossing something off a to-do list. So make the list of what needs to be get done, prioritize it, block it out. And then my blog is stacyk.net, STACYK.net. And it's got a lot of how-to stuff in QuickBooks Online.
Awesome. And for our listeners too, Stacy was the final episode of a crash course in small business finance. We brought it home to talk about long-term sustainability. So once you get going, what are the things you need to implement in your business to make sure you set yourself up for the long run? So I really want to encourage you to check out that series. And here's the deal. We don't answer all the questions on the series. It's a crash course. It's to get you started. It's to get you pointed in the right direction. We've got some great SMEs that participated in the series for you. So be sure to subscribe and also pass it along to other veteran entrepreneurs and military spouses in your network. And lastly, if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the Transition Podcast on iTunes, Spotify, your favorite podcast hosting network. We're able to do that show through the support of the MetLife Foundation, and we're actually able to do the crash course in small business finance thanks to the support from our partners at Intuit. So until next time, everyone, peace, love,